two pillars of socialism, that one comes in from the right, one comes in from the left. You have National Socialism on the right, which is essentially corporatism. You could call that corporatism. This is what so-called these quote-unquote anarchists, or these cultural Marxists, which is what they really are trying to wage war against. You know, they're trying to wage cultural war against corporatism. And I'm not a fan of corporatism either. So, you know, just because I'm not for one side, don't get it twisted and think I'm for the other side. I'm not for out-of-control capitalism or corporatism. And corporatism, you know, flows into National Socialism. Now, on the left-hand side, you have what's called Fabian socialism, or incremental socialism. In the United States, this is what's operating right now. People call it also democratic socialism. All right, so this is the left-wing brand. These two pillars of socialism eventually merge, and they emerge at the place where all of this left-wing and right-wing come together and ultimately merge power. They consolidate power. And that's international socialism, or what I previously called communism. But what that dynamic ultimately really is simply called globalism. It is the concept of the New World Order that has been talked about by so many researchers. I call it the Dark New World Order because I distinguish between the New World Order of slavery and the destruction of rights, and, you know, putting people into mental bondage that leads to physical bondage. I distinguish that from a positive New World Order of the creation of a society that is based in an understanding of rights, in conscience, in true freedom, and the understanding and recognition of individual sovereignty. I do think we need that form of a New World Order, you know, but I make that distinguishment between the light New World Order and the dark New World Order. So to go back to the original spirit of the question here, people who think that, you know, there always has to be authority in place and there always has to be government, they don't understand the concept that is chaos. Slavery, which is what authority is all about, the claim that someone else that you are their master and they have a moral obligation to obey your arbitrary commands. Okay? That's what all man's law is about. Whether someone recognizes that or not, or is confused and thinks man's law is about something else, that's what man's law is. It's the claim of authority over other people. And it's saying, I'm the master, you must obey my commands. You have a moral obligation to obey. Not because you're upset because you're trying to choose the right thing and you may have chosen the wrong thing, but because you're upset that you broke my command. You know, this idea of people follow the law and don't want to break it and feel guilty when they break it, even if the law is telling them that they don't have a right to do something that they do have a right to do, or that they must do something that they don't really have an obligation to do. Taxation being one of them. You could look at drug laws, people telling you you don't have a right to put something into your own body when your body belongs to you. You know, we're not talking about the actions you may go and commit afterward, which you have to be held responsible for, but the act of actually possessing a substance and putting it into your own body, or to exchange it for whatever goods or services or money that other people voluntarily want to exchange it for. These are rights. You know, and people have to stop thinking about them as something that is illicit or illegal. If no one else is harmed in the process of conducting an action, that was a rightful action to take. You have a right to take that action, including putting whatever you want into your own body. So this notion of authority and the fear of it not being there is all ultimately the fear of personal responsibility. To choose and understand deeply right action over wrong action. Now, this obfuscation of words is another big part of this dynamic, because people think anarchy means something that it does not mean. See, people think anarchy, they equate it with chaos, and this is from a mind control technique that is endless repetition. If you endlessly repeat that a word means something that it does not mean, in other words, if I say anarchy is chaos, if there was anarchy, there would be chaos, and you heard this your whole life growing up, over and over and over, repetitiously, endlessly, you would eventually equate the two terms, when in fact, one term has nothing whatsoever to do with the other. Chaos has nothing whatsoever to do with anarchy. We are in chaos now, Because we are under the belief in authority. Because the belief in authority and the acceptance of the belief in authority are so widespread. Slavery and violence, which is what the whole system of authority is creating, that's chaos. That's chaos. When we recognize that anarchy is the true state of being, it's the true natural state of humanity. See, the word anarchy has to be understood. The prefix a or an in Greek means the absence of, not present, not there. That's what a or an, if you tack it on to another word in Greek, means. And then the word archon in Greek, archon. So where anarchy comes from is an archon. Okay? So an means not present, not there, absent, the absence of. Archon means ruler or master. You put them together. The absence of rulers, not the absence of rules. Anarchy does not mean no rules. There's always rules in effect because natural law, spiritual law is always in effect. Right and wrong are always present. They are always in effect. Okay? So it does not mean the absence of rules. It means the absence of rulers. It means the absence of authority figures. The absence of masters who have some sort of an imagined moral right to command. And it also means the absence of slaves. You tell people anarchy means the absence of slavery, they won't even believe you that that's what the word means. They've been so conditioned to think of another definition of the word. We have to get better clarity about our definitions. Stop accepting erroneous connotations of words and understand what words really mean from their roots. The word anarchy means no rulers, no masters, and therefore it means no masters and no slaves. It means the absence of master-slave relationships. Now, I like to call it anarchony. I like that term better. Anarchony is better to me than anarchy, which has such a bad stigma because of this mind control technique of the obfuscation of words. But if we use the term anarchony, that literally has the term archon in the middle of it. And then when you use that word, you know, I suggest coining a new word in the English language, anarchony. All right? Then you say that to people, and people will be like, well, what does that mean? And then you could explain what the word archon means.
Right.
Then it takes on a whole new connotation in their mind. And that's very difficult to undo, because the word archon is right in the middle of the word. And they'll see that means master. If you know what the word archon means in Greek, look it up in any Greek dictionary. Okay? The word archon means master. And if that's in the word, then people understand more readily what it means because they can see it. And I like the term, instead of anarchist, I like the term, well, instead of anarchist, anarchonist. Okay, so anarchony, anarchonist. What people who believe in authority are, instead of calling them statists, I like to call them archonists. An archonist is one who accepts masters. They accept the master-slave relationship.
And that's a really good point, because there are some people that they don't identify with slavery.
Right.
And there are some people that it seems that's all they understand, to either be controlled or to control someone else.
Right. This is the dynamic of an imbalanced consciousness. See, this is symbolized very deeply in many ancient mystery traditions, wisdom traditions. There's a symbol that repeats over and over and over again in many ancient traditions, and it's a symbol of three pillars or three paths, three ways you can look at it as. You have the left-hand path, and some of the traditions that you'll see the symbolism is in particular are the tarot tradition. You'll see the three pillars repeated over and over again, particularly in the major arcana of the tarot. You'll see this very, very powerfully in the Kabbalistic tradition, the ancient Hebrew tradition of Kabbalah. And you'll also see this very prominently in the tradition of Freemasonry. You'll see this even in the modern tradition of Freemasonry, but particularly the esoteric, the ancient tradition. So these three pillars represent aspects of ourselves. They represent the masculine, the feminine, and then the divine union between the two. So the left-hand pillar you could look at as the dynamic of control. Okay, you could look at that as the masculine aspect. You could look at it as the left brain hemisphere. The right brain pillar you could look at as the right side pillar you could look at as the sacred feminine aspect. Okay, you could look at that as true care, nurturing, compassion, intuition, creativity, etc. The creative aspect. And you know, we can't be imbalanced toward one side or another. We have to exercise self-control. There needs to be some level of control in place, but not externally. It needs to be exercised within. We need to become our own masters. You know, self-mastery.
And that term you used, first time I've heard this, not external monarchy, but internal monarchy.
I call sovereignty internal monarchy. If we come to rule our own thoughts, emotions, and actions, which is all we really have the right to rule over, we become the master of the kingdom of self. Population 1. And that's all we have a right to rule. We have no right to rule anyone else. So that state of taking full ownership of your thoughts, emotions, actions, and bringing them into unity consciousness, such that as you think, so you feel, so you act, no contradiction between the three expressions of your consciousness. I call that internal monarchy. You are the one ruler. Monarch, mon, one. Archon, ruler. Monarch means one ruler. Okay? And think about it. Monarch is a butterfly, which represents a state of transformation. Okay? It represents coming out of a transformative state, that we're being held in a cocoon and then emerge as a butterfly to powerfully transform our consciousness. It's a very powerful symbol. This is also why they co-opt it with the mind control program called Monarch. They want to co-opt that idea, and you know, they want to be the monarch, the one ruler external to someone else. So yeah, I call sovereignty this state of internal non-duality and ownership, true ownership of self, and recognizing that we are not slaves, that we are our own masters. I call it internal monarchy. You know, and contrast this with internal anarchy. When we don't rule the self, when we don't exercise good self-governance, then we're in a state of internal confusion. And internal confusion will always leave us open to manipulation and control from without. And so that's why I'm not a fan of internal anarchy. There needs to be a ruler within. Okay, it's very important to have rulership within. That's what self-mastery is all about. So we need to get rid of internal anarchy, and we need to replace it with internal monarchy. Simultaneous to that, we need to get rid of external monarchy and replace it with external anarchy.
And this is really relevant in terms of what I'm studying now with solar cycles. Those that are conscious enough to know the changes that it brings, that have a certain sense of self-mastery, they won't be as affected in a negative sense as others that are completely out of control and completely reactive to all these things. But which brings me now to meditation, which is a very important tool to center ourselves, but for some people can also be a way of escaping reality and escaping what their senses are telling them. And articulate that a little bit, because I've seen a lot of that firsthand in places I've been before.
Sure. To speak to the first dynamic, when a lot of these negative changes may come to pass, the people who have not paid attention and who have not exercised their will in order to come into the dynamic of self-ownership and self-rulership, they're going to be in a profoundly devastated psychological condition. And I think all we can do is really feel for them, and maybe, you know, if we're in a position to do so, offer some help and guidance at that point, if we're in such a position to do so ourselves with what we may be going through at such a time. I'm trying to avert that, as are many other great teachers in the world, really trying to avert that disastrous scenario of another fall of humanity and another total, you know, societal collapse, instead of choosing the way of the middle pillar of not falling into becoming a controller, or not falling into accepting control and accepting authority, and therefore we have a society that is, you know, run on the dynamic of slavery and violence and authority, you know, and all these negative things. You know, if we don't more of us don't come together and do the work to put out the truth about these concepts and help people to understand them very efficiently, we are going to see a collapse happen like that, and that's what we're all trying to really work to avert and avoid. But those who aren't paying attention, who haven't paid their dues to pay